Welcome everyone to our webinar, Sharing Tales from the Field, Stories from One-on-One Counseling Sessions. My name is Al Mogliato. I'll be your technical assistant, and I'll take you through the housekeeping slides for today's webinar. Listening to the webinar. The audio for today's webinar can be accessed using your computer audio or by calling in by phone. If you select computer audio, please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or prefer to listen by phone, you can dial into 1-929-205-6099. The meeting code is 286-018-031. Captioning. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found by clicking on the CC button in your Zoom controls at the bottom of the screen. If you do not see the captions after clicking through the button, please alert the host via the chat box. You may also view captions in your browser at http://www.streamtext.net/player?event=NDI. Submitting questions. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct them accordingly. If your question is not answered during the webinar, or you are listening by phone and not logged in, you can email them to me. My email address is amilioto@ndi-inc.org. Technical assistance. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me a message, or you can also email me again. My address is amilioto@ndi-inc.org. Please note the webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the National Disability Institute website at https://www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org/resources/webinars/empowered-cities-webinars. And with that, I will let Nancy Buteau kick things off.
Thanks so much, Al. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Empowered NYC. For those of you who have been on the webinar before, Empowered NYC is an initiative that has created new strategies and tools to enable New Yorkers with disabilities and their families to improve their financial stability. This initiative is advancing financial capability by offering tailored one-on-one financial counseling for people with disabilities, enhanced with new expertise, outreach, and tools, and providing this monthly webinar to you so that this training series can help you as providers work better with the individuals you're serving. And we can move on to the next slide that says strategic partners, Al. Okay, and we can go one more. So some of our strategic partners are the City of New York, led by New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Financial Empowerment, and the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. Also us, National Disability Institute, City Community Development, Poses Family Foundation, and an advisory board of municipal offices, disability service providers, and financial empowerment service providers. For those of you who have been on our webinars in the past, we used to have all of our partners come on and talk a little bit about their agencies. In the interest of time, we don't do that anymore. However, for those of you that registered and had the PowerPoint sent to you in advance, there are several slides at the end of the presentation that you won't see today that will give you more information about those partners. So feel free to look at that at your leisure. Next slide. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Empowered NYC referrals. We're going to actually talk to you about that a couple times today because we're very happy and we want you to be able to refer your clients to one of our financial counselors. So as you know, these counselors specialize in one-on-one financial counseling. Counseling services are free and confidential. Counselors can help the person access their credit report and consider banking and savings accounts. And the counselors have been trained on disability benefits that can address the financial aspects of those benefits, including work incentives and income limits. And sessions will be available in all 5 boroughs. And to make an appointment with a financial counselor, you can go to nyc.gov/EmpoweredNYC. So before I introduce the speakers, I just want to mention our objectives for today's webinar. We're going to learn how Empowered NYC financial counselors are assisting New Yorkers with disabilities and their families to become more financially empowered. So I'm really excited. We have several counselors in the room with us that are going to be talking about some of the clients they've assisted throughout this process. Another objective is to gain an understanding of how an Empowered NYC counselor can assist individuals you serve in your community-based programs. So hopefully making your job easier. And lastly, obtain the latest information on the sites where Empowered NYC hosts these financial counselors. Right before I introduce our Department of Consumer Affairs Worker Protection staff, I just want to let everybody know that you can submit your questions in the Q&A box. I believe that's located on the bottom of your screen that you're looking at. And as you submit questions, we will be sure to answer them either as the presentation goes on or at the end when we have time for questions and answers. So please submit any questions you may have. And with that, I would like to turn it over to the first portion of our webinar and introduce today's speakers from the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, formerly the Department of Consumer Affairs. From the Office of Financial Empowerment, the Empowerment NYC team, we have Wanda Lopez, the Assistant Director of Special Projects, and Crystal Rivera, our Program Officer. And with that, I will turn it over to Wanda and Crystal.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for using all of those names. We are going through a name change. So yes, we will be known as the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to align with our expanded mission, but formerly the Department of Consumer Affairs. We are 50 years old this year, and the department has been working to protect and enhance the daily economic lives of New Yorkers to create thriving communities. Within this department, we do have this Office of Financial Empowerment that focuses on educating and empowering New Yorkers with their neighborhoods to improve financial stability. OFE is the first local government initiative in the country with the mission to educate, empower, and protect New Yorkers and neighborhoods with low income so they can build assets and make the most of their financial resources. So we have 5 programs, but our oldest is this financial counseling program that began in 2008. And since that time, we have served over 50,000 New Yorkers and provided over 100,000 counseling sessions, reducing debt by over 54 million and increasing savings by over 4 million. So on an annual basis, through our financial empowerment centers, we are serving at least 8,000 clients per year. So we're excited to work on this Empowered NYC initiative to bring the specialized financial counseling services to people who live and work in New York City.
And with that, we'll turn it over to Crystal.
The Department of Consumer Affairs worked with National Disability Institute to develop maps that identify the areas with the largest number of people with disabilities. National Disability Institute used community survey data to identify target neighborhoods, position counselors in convenient locations, develop efficient marketing and outreach to reach the maximum number of people who can benefit from the counseling. Given the size of the city, it was important that we understood where New Yorkers with disabilities and their families live. National Disability Institute created a map using American survey data. In addition to the input of our advisory board and the community input sessions, we are using maps to target our services, marketing, and outreach in areas with the largest need. The maps assisted in our connections and conversations with community boards and local elected officials. We continue to build upon the maps and other data points to serve locations.
Next slide.
So as Nancy pointed out, we worked with the National Disability Institute and members of the advisory board to determine the best path for the financial counselor training. We wanted counselors to know that it's important to understand the federal benefits when working with individuals who may receive SSI, SSDI, especially when there are many rules related to each of these programs that can assist someone in going to work, earning income, contributing more to their communities while not necessarily losing those benefits, most importantly, medical benefits. New York City is fortunate to have the options of supporting New Yorkers with additional benefits and housing supports beyond the federal disability benefits. These state supplements and matches are administered under different rules than the federal rules. So knowing the state and the city benefits is key, as well as knowing who to go to and when you need assistance, including, what office runs what program. So they had to learn all of that in addition to taking the NYCHA course to understand the housing rules and regulations. And then NDI helps with the integration of the disability benefits into the financial counseling process to allow financial counselors to provide this enhanced one-on-one counseling to individuals with disabilities, including how to utilize the work incentives, how earnings will affect their benefits, and how to communicate effectively with the Social Security Administration and other public benefits programs to enhance financial outcomes. And they continue to provide weekly technical assistance support where we can share complex scenarios and ensure that we're handling to the best of our ability and using our resources. And with that, we come to the next slide.
The New York Legal Assistance Group Financial Counseling Division is the service provider for EmpoweredNYC free specialized financial counseling services. They provide counseling services citywide. The New York Legal Assistance Group partner with Arriva to cover the Bronx. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is our EmpoweredNYC webpage, and you can make an appointment by either, if you're a client, you can make an appointment by clicking a handy dandy link that says, please book an appointment with financial counseling. And if you're a provider, you can scroll a little bit further down on the webpage, and it's a special form for providers that allows you to refer a client. Next slide, Nancy. Oh, back to Nancy Butto.
Thank you so much, Crystal. So as you just heard, we've got folks here from NYLAG as well as from Arriva. And we're so happy to have them here to talk to us. So we have Mario Gutierrez, Jorge Ruiz, Katie Crumpter, Wari Gonzalez, and Alma Rojas. So I am going to first turn it over to Mario, who is going to talk about some individuals that he has worked with through this project. And with that, I will turn it over to Mario and the next slide.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be on this call and to share some of the successes and challenges that my team and I have seen in the field. So for the first person, or for the first case, I wanted to share some news on a client I met at a college here in New York. Her name's Carla, and she actually was referred by another financial counselor in an unrelated project, who stated that, one, she identified as having a disability, and two, she was interested in learning about the ABLE account. And so he said that's out of his scope of expertise, and referred her to me. So this was during the early months of Empowered NYC, when we were somewhat going from looking for sites, basically. So this was somewhat of a house call in a sense, because we did not have this site set up, but we decided that this client wanted to meet with a counselor, so we decided to just go visit the school and get a room and talk to the student. And happy we did, because Carla was quite amazing. She had some big long-term plans that she really wanted to set into motion. And part of that was the quest to begin to build her assets. So we spoke a bit about her, the ABLE account, first confirm whether or not she was eligible for it, and the purpose of that account. And during our conversation, it became somewhat clear that I may need to advise against the ABLE account. And that's because Carla was talking about the ABLE account as more of a short-term savings account, one in which she would go in and out quite regularly. And there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but she can do that with a savings account, assuming that she's not saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. So after we talked about that a bit more, and we realized that maybe the account may not necessarily be the best fit, Carla thought about it a bit more. She came back a few weeks later with her mother, which we went through everything again, and then she decided, you know what, the ABLE account is indeed for her, and she intends to use it for the medium / long term. So it was really exciting. We went through the website, the NDI website or NRC ABLE account website. We compared numerous ABLE accounts, and it was down to Massachusetts and Virginia. Sorry if any of you guys are on the call, but she chose Massachusetts. After we went through somewhat of a light cost benefit analysis, comparing the expense ratio, the annual maintenance fees, she decided, along with some advice from me, that the Massachusetts account would be best. Well, we spoke about risk tolerance, and she eventually came to the realization that she would be comfortable with the aggressive portfolio with 70% stocks. So she is plugging away. She's saving money. She's also not looking at the account on a regular basis, which actually is a good thing. We're just encouraging her to do that, and now trying to figure out what's the next step for her to continue to build her empire. So with the next case that I wanted to bring to your attention, this one's a little probably not as chipper. I met Miss K, or rather I received an email from a case manager at a settlement house here in New York City, who shared with me that Miss K received a letter from the Social Security Administration stating that she owed money, and that her SSDI would be reduced or stopped in order to pay back this money. I made, again, another house visit to the settlement house to speak to the case manager and to Miss K, and come to find out it all stemmed from sometime in 2017, when she decided to go to a casino and gamble and have fun, which is definitely something she should be doing. Unfortunately, fortunately, she won $10,000, which is quite amazing. She cashed it out at the casino, and then, according to Ms. K, at that point, since the night was still relatively young, she and her the folks she went to the casino with, they encouraged her to go back and try to double it. Sadly, she lost all of the money, and that was that. And that was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And now she's getting a letter stating that she was, one, over-incomed and over-resourced. So after going through the details with Ms. K a bit more, through her case manager, because Ms. K spoke a language other than English, we were able to determine that indeed Ms. K was sure that there was no money left over at the end of that evening, and that she was she never brought anything back home, basically. So thankfully, with the training that we got with NDI and OFE and some of our other partners, and then with some supplemental training that, informal training that I got from NYLAG legal partners, I was able to help Ms. K fill out a request for, I'm blanking. So it's not the waiver, so what is it? The reconsideration. Thank you, the recon. So we were gonna do a waiver, but then the attorneys looked at it and said a recon might make more sense here. So I helped her fill out the request for reconsideration. I went with her to the Social Security office. This is not something we typically do, but Ms. K, who has PTSD, was really concerned and scared about going back to the office. She had some terrible experiences there, so I wanted to at least be there for her and present her case, which we did. And now we're awaiting word from the SSA. We did receive some notice that stated that Ms. K has an overpayment of about $400. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up now is because the overpayment was for $5,000. So now that we got this letter stating that she has an overpayment of $400, the presumption could be that maybe they did actually waive it. But we're going to check back in with SSA to confirm that. So, to be continued. And then finally, the last case I wanted to present was on my actual first client. My first client, Jessica, came to NYLAG's office, and she was looking for work, and she wanted to know how her benefits would be affected if she were to go back to work. She had benefits in the past, and she did go to work at some point, and she had an overpayment, and she did not want that to happen again. So going back to the training we received, I spoke with Jessica on a matter of issues concerning going back to work, particularly the trial work period, the extended period of eligibility, ERWs, all of these really cool things that we learned over the last 7 months or so. And we had a very constructive conversation on what to expect. So thankfully, Jessica did go back to work. She started maybe about 2 months ago. She's making a decent amount of money, meaning that she's likely going to fall off the rows of SSDI, but she knows that that's the case. She welcomes it, and she feels prepared and ready to be able to sustain outside of that. So, yep. So those are my cases. I'll give it back to Nancy now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario. Those are great. I want to mention a few things, and one of the things I want to mention, just so everybody's clear, is we have changed names. We've changed, we haven't given any ages, so we're not releasing any personally identifiable information. So I just wanted everyone to know that. And then I just wanted to follow up on a couple things before I turn it over to Jorge. So Mario talked about ABLE accounts, and I wanted everybody who hasn't been on all of our webinars to know that earlier this year we did have an entire webinar just like this one on ABLE accounts. So if you are interested in that, you can go to our website, which Al mentioned earlier, it'll be up again towards the end of the presentation. And you can go to those archives and you can actually watch that, that webinar. Something else that Mario mentioned was the ABLE NRC, which is the ABLE National Resource Center. And that's ablenrc.org. And for those of you who are interested for more information, you can go there. As Mario mentioned, he went there to compare various ABLE accounts to see which one would work best for the person he was working with. And then Mario, the last thing, I just want to say how wonderful that you're assisting somebody with this overpayment. And I hope that that gives everybody on the line good news to know that just because you're in an overpayment doesn't mean you'll always be in an overpayment, doesn't mean you'll never be on the Social Security Administration rolls again. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can't find employment. So thank you very much. We appreciate those excellent stories. And with that, I will turn it over to Jorge Ruiz.
Thank you, Nancy. My name is Jorge. I am a financial counselor with the New York Legal Assistance Group. It's great to be with you guys here today. And, I'm very pleased to be working with the EmpoweredNYC project, to be part of that first group of counselors to, dive in and really work on some very important issues that are coming up with regards to financial counseling and offering it to a new demographic. It's really exciting and very educational because we're kind of learning all these things as we go along. But I want to talk about my client, Bob, who is a college senior in his late 20s. He was referred by the accessibility office at his college. And the reason why he was referred was that he had opened up a checking account and he wanted to start saving, and he was finding it difficult to do that within his checking account because it sort of created in his mind the scenario of having to use up all the money that was in his account because of fear of the resource limit for SSI and wanting to keep himself below that. So we sat down, had a conversation about it, and basically, in that conversation, it came up opening up a savings account. So we compared different options that were available, and we decided to select an option alongside his checking account with the same bank. So we went ahead and did that. And since February, we've been checking in periodically to see how the savings is going, and I'm very happy to say that he has saved to date $166. So I'm very proud of him. He's shown a lot of discipline as well in some of his budgeting practices, which we do every month. We sit down and revisit his budget, and he's been very disciplined about bringing his own food from home, being mindful of his spending outside, and just putting into practice some of the different things that we talk about in terms of being frugal and being able to find ways to sort of plug holes in his budget with things that he already has as opposed to buying more things outside. So since then he has saved $166, and his goal is to use a portion of the money that he has saved towards motorcycle lessons, which sounds kind of frightening to me, but very exciting for him. So it's something that I do support as long as he wears a helmet and he's safe about what he's doing. So, but he's a great person, and very proud of him. And eventually, we're going to transition our discussion towards ABLE accounts, and especially now that he's a college senior, he is planning to work very soon. So eventually our conversation will go there. We've already kind of had preliminary discussions about what ABLE accounts are, but I expect, in the next few months, it'll be more towards eventually seeing about opening up an ABLE account for him. With that said, I'm done. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Jorge. I love that you said working with this new demographic. And that's really what this project is. Not that you all haven't worked with folks with disabilities before, but now you've been trained in so many different areas. In case Wanda didn't mention it before, just so everybody out there listening knows, the counselors have received over 80 hours worth of training. So they know their stuff, and they certainly know their stuff when it comes to this new demographic in terms of working with people specifically with disabilities. And for some people out there, $166 may not seem like much, and for others, that may seem like a huge amount of money. And whether that's for motorcycle lessons or, saving for a business or whatever it may be, just the fact that you're assisting people who were having trouble in the past is great. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I am now going to turn it over to Guari Gonzalez. Oh, no, you're right.
Well, hello. So today I'll be talking about Sue. So the way how I met Sue was from a site that I was located at. So Sue wants to eventually be able to buy a house, and one of the workers in that location referred her to me. Now, I've worked with a lot of people, but Sue came with a really different type of energy. Sue was ready to go from the beginning, and she was very adamant on and focused on what she wanted to achieve. So it really, got me invested in, let's say, in a sense, to really try to help her, because she was just like, let's go, let's do it. Whatever I have to do, I'm gonna do it. And so at first, she came with her own expectations of what would have to be done. She was really focused on, let's say, her credit score, and that's what she thought was the most important thing that she would have to look at when is, to later down the line be able to, let's say, get a loan or for a house. But as we were looking, we also noticed that she had really high debt. It's not stated here, but her debt was a little over $40,000. So when I was seeing her for the first time, one of my challenges, since like I said, she did come with a lot of energy and ready to go, was to make her see that this process will take some time, because the thing is that a lot of people do, some people, not a lot, but some people do come with the expectation that it could be done quick and quickly. But it's not the case, and it's the baby steps that really help. And that's something that she didn't really notice until a little later on. But still, let's go back to the beginning. So my first things were to get her to know and, let's say, realize what are the things that we have to focus on. So the first session was that, we getting all the basics down. Me and her met several times throughout the month. And Sue was a client that I met from, let's say, from the beginning of the EmpoweredNYC program until now, and I'm still seeing her. But okay, so as we were going along, we were, taking those little baby steps. We were, let's say, disputing wrong debts. We were, saving up to pay off other debts. We talked about strategic and ways to build credit. So now, with the outcome of that was that the first thing is with the debt. Me and her were able to reduce her debt from a little over $40,000 to about $16,000. And then also the credit score. So last time we checked, which was a little back, we increased her credit score by 41 points. Now the thing is, and this is something that I usually like to always let people know, is that, like I said about the baby steps, it may not seem like we're going somewhere, because she actually, like 2.5 months in, she was like, what are we doing? I don't see nothing happening. I don't see nothing changing and stuff like that. So then I sat down with her, and then we looked at the changes that have happened since she first came until at that moment. And her credit score went up and her debts were reduced by, let's say like about $10,000. And then, you know, a few later on, we got to the point where we are now. So, and then that's when she started seeing how important were those little steps that we took, and how, and as time goes on, how big of an impact they have. So now what we're doing is we're focusing on now still reducing her debt, but now savings. Now we're trying to get her into really focus into savings, since she has now more money to save. When before it was money fighting off debt, now some of that money could be changed to saving. So it's just that it's maybe at the beginning it may seem like a let's say a very desperate and hard and situation and very slow moving, but after you get through that, then it becomes much easier and better, and then you're able to transition to other steps. And so I'll just leave it there, where she's much happier now, and hopefully in a year or so, then she could be already ready to really start looking into houses and have that savings to help her get what she wants.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Glory. So you had mentioned that you have been seeing her since kind of the beginning. So I just want to let everybody know out there that some of our sites started opening up right around January-ish. So you've probably been seeing her for about 5 months, is my guess. So the fact that in 5 months she has reduced her debt $34,000 and that she's increased her credit score by 41 points is absolutely amazing. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is when someone has a lot of debt or has a lot of goals, it is going to take time. And the fact that you're taking her through all these steps and that she's seeing a result is helping her to become more positive that, you know, her goals will come true. And unfortunately, a lot of folks who are on SSI and SSDI may think that those goals aren't going to come true, and may think that they may not own a home one day or whatever it is that they want. And this is living proof that that's just not true. So thank you very much for sharing that. We appreciate it. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Katie Quinter.
Hi, everybody. I have 2 cases that I'm going to talk about that share a lot of similarities, but have a few significant differences. So the first couple that I'm going to talk about are Craig and Holly Jones. And they are in their mid-50s, and they have 3 children. One who is 21, a son who's 21, and he's receiving, as associate is receiving SSI. I do want to add something here. The mother is actually currently receiving SSDI, so he's actually receiving SSDI currently, but she expects to go back to work within the next 6 months to a year, hopefully. So they came in, they were referred by a CWIC at one of our community partners. And they came in because they had been to some type of meeting about ABLE accounts, and they had a lot of questions. I guess they had heard a lot of contradictory information about ABLE accounts and how to use them, and how, whether or not they would be appropriate for their son. So we talked a lot about ABLE accounts and the purposes of them. They had created in their estate plan, they had set up a special needs trust for their son. We talked a lot about that and how an ABLE account doesn't replace the need for a special needs trust. We also talked about possibly creating a special needs trust separately outside of their will document, because they expect our son to receive possibly some money from grandparents on both sides. And theoretically that would happen before the parents died, so they would need a separate special needs trust document for that. So what we spent a lot of time talking about was the ABLE accounts, and we actually went to the ablenrc.org website to compare and contrast a number of different ABLE accounts. And they hadn't chosen one because what they wanted to do, their goal was to, I gave them a lot of information and told them how to read the comparison chart and how to get more information about a specific state's ABLE account. But what they wanted to do, their son is in a 5-year test or pilot program with supported decision-making in New York City through Hunter College, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a 5-year program. So he has a number of supported decision makers. So what they had planned on doing was taking the information that I gave them and now their knowledge and what they feel like they could help answer questions and bringing that to their son and his supported decision his financial supported decision makers, and have them all discuss it together, and then possibly set up a follow-up meeting with me in the summertime sometime. So the son is still in school or is just finishing up school program for the year, and then hopefully we'll schedule a meeting with their son and his financial decision makers. We can go to the next slide. The next slide is about the Smith family. And this was originally supposed to be with the whole family. This was supposed to be with the mother and the father and the son. But there was an event that he didn't want to miss on the day of our meeting. So we'll do a follow-up meeting where he is involved. And initially, when they came in, they were actually a referral from the previously mentioned Jones family, which was a really nice thing to happen. It's nice that they're talking within their community so quickly. I had met the Jones, and then literally the day after I met the Jones, the Smith family called for an appointment. We had to wait a while for an available appointment, but it was a really good appointment. They also went to that ABLE meeting and came away with a lot of contradictory information and advice. And so that was the impetus for their meeting. But really, we spent a lot of time on their son possibly getting a job. He is going to be done with school at the end of June. He'll be finished with his sort of full-time school program. And they wanted to know, so we talked a lot about how working would impact his SSI benefit. And I used a worksheet to show them the dollars as to the reduction and how much their son would need to earn in order to lose the SSI benefit completely. We talked a lot about Medicaid and how he's really not at risk for losing that unless something very significant happens, which we also talked about because their son is an artist. And so we talked a lot about structured payments and how that would affect his benefits. So that was actually a lot, even though they made the appointment and said that they wanted to talk about ABLE accounts, that was actually a good chunk of our meeting was talking about work. And we also talked a lot about impairment-related work incentives and how they could help reduce the actual reportable income amount. And then the rest of it, and then we spent a not insignificant time talking about ABLE accounts and special needs trusts and what role each of them play. This family actually has quite a bit more resources and family resources than the Jones family that I had previously met. So they were really concerned. And this is an only child. Their son is an only child and doesn't have any siblings. So we spent a lot of time talking about successor trustees, successor guardians, because they actually are just finishing up the process of getting guardianship for their son. I think they just had literally a court date left that they had to go and get sworn in. And so we talked a lot. They have significant concerns about a trustee not allowing their son to access the funds that they wanted him to have access to. So we talked a lot about that. Not that I was able to really, I was able to calm down a little bit, but it's a concern that I think a lot of parents of only children have. So that was really, those were really the things. Now I expect to, they were going to, sort of think about all that stuff, we talked about the AbleNRC website. We didn't really have time to go through it, but I did discuss how they could, you can use the compare tool for different states, and how you don't have to be, there are some states that you don't have to be a resident of. So we did talk a lot about that. They had planned to investigate further on their own. But I expect them to book a follow-up meeting with their son in the next, probably over the summer sometime, when sort of school is done. So those were my two cases.
Thank you so much, Katie. So a few things I want to point out, which are phenomenal. One is you had said that the first person that you talked about was referred to you by a CWIC, which is wonderful. So for those of you out there, a CWIC is a community work incentive coordinator that works for the WIPA project, Work Incentive Planning and Assistance. So those are projects that are actually funded by the Social Security Administration to provide beneficiaries with information on how their benefits will be affected when they go to work. So, so kudos that that you got that referral from them. And for everybody on the webinar, I just want you to know that this project has worked with CWICs. We've met with the CWICs, and we have a partnership of making referrals back and forth. So that's really important for people who are on disability benefits and want to return to work. Also, with that first scenario, you talked about the difference between able and special needs trusts. That's really complicated, high-level information that not a lot of individuals can get out in the community. So the fact that you're able to do that is wonderful. And then I also, with the second story, loved that you said that even though the son missed the meeting, you still had the meeting with the parents. And what Katie had said to me is it's getting towards the end of school and there was a school fair, and he didn't want to miss that. So, you know, certainly understood, right? But again, this project is for people with disabilities and their families. So even though he didn't attend the meeting, Katie was still able to meet with the family. And the fact that that family was referred to you by another family just lets us know that things are really moving smoothly, and people are hearing about the project, hearing about it in positive ways, and then making referrals. And I think now that school is ending for the year, we are going to see a lot more families and individuals who they're leaving school and they're about to start work and they just don't know how work is going to affect their benefits. So I just want everybody to know that our webinar next month is actually just going to tackle those issues and talk about youth who are leaving high school and things like the student earned income exclusion and how students are able to benefit that if they're still in high school or if they've gone to a college program. And we're going to talk about a couple other work incentives that go along with that. So thank you very much, Katie. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our last, but certainly not least, speaker, Alma, who always brings us very interesting situations to our TA calls each week, including this one. So with that, I will turn it over to Alma.
Hi, thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone on the phone. My name is Alma, and I'm a financial counselor with New York Legal Assistance Group. Today, I'm going to be talking about Jane, who is in her mid-60s. Jane was an internal referral from one of our NYLAG legal units. She came to me because late last year, Jane received notices from the Social Security Administration that they had overpaid her. The overpayment, they stated, was because her resources were more than a person could own and still get SSI. So the Social Security Administration counted over 15 months of overpayment. And so as a result, her SSI cash benefit would be suspended. And furthermore, she was supposed to start receiving Social Security retirement benefits, but that benefit would also be reduced for recoupment for the overpayment. Jane had tried to resolve the issue on her own by explaining the situation to Social Security, and also had filed an application for reconsideration. Next slide, please. Jane and I, we did our research, and we decided to submit an application for waiver of overpayment. And along with the waiver, we submitted a detailed letter explaining why we thought she was not at fault, and we created an appendix for this and attached supporting documentation. The whole packet that we sent to the Social Security Administration was over 50 pages long. And so in determining whether Jane was at fault for the overpayment, I did some research on my own, and I also reached out to Nancy at the National Disability Institute and also NILAC's Public Benefit Unit for assistance. We determined that she was not at fault for 3 reasons. The first reason is that there were a few accounts in Jane's name. However, one of the accounts was the Uniform Transfer to Minors Act, also called a UTMA account. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation. But basically in the POMS, it states that UTMA assets are not the custodian resources for SSI purposes because Jane cannot legally use the funds, any of the funds in an UTMA account for her support. It's only for the custodial beneficiary. So to prove that it was an UTMA account, we submitted bank records for the months in question. The second reason she was not at fault was that Jane was in a housing court case with her landlord, and she had been ordered by the judge to make some payments. However, the landlord did not cash her rent checks. So we looked again in the POMS, and there is a regulation that states if the individual alleges uncashed checks written prior to the first of the month, they may reconsider an encumbrance and reduce equity value of the checking account by the encumbered amount. So we use a lot of technical language in our letter, just because we figure, you know, that gives us credence that we did our research, we know what we're talking about, and we also added like little POM regulations whenever we could find them. So another one was like in the POMS, it actually gives an example that is kind of almost word for word exact thing that happened with Jane. So where there was an allegation of a rent check that had not cleared the bank. And so for proof of this, we submitted the court order slip that was signed by the judge, copies of the checks that Jane had made, bank statements proving that there had been no withdrawal, and then also an advocacy letter from her legal team. And for the last reason that she was not at fault, POMS does state that even if well, Jane did not know that she was supposed to report the situation to SSA. She did not know that she had to tell the SSA that her landlord was not cashing checks or that the bank account was actually an UTMA account. But POMS does state that even if she did know this, because of her health requirements, and Jane had a lot of health issues during the period in question, if she didn't have the ability to comply with the reporting requirements, SSA would kind of take that into consideration. So we submitted a doctor's note in the packet. And so her overpayment was for over 2 years ago, and so she had just received notice late last year. She came to me in March, and so it took us about 3 months actually to get everything together. And so, but I will say that whenever we called Social Security, they were very nice and they were very helpful to us, explaining like the exact language that we needed to use and what supporting documents we should submit as well. And we spoke last week with Social Security, and they did say that they would waive, they had processed the waivement and that she had been approved. And so she should be receiving, her benefits again for SSI, and then, which of course now is a different amount than she was used to because now she's going to be receiving SSA retirement. But that is no longer going to be reduced for recoupment. And yeah, and most importantly, she's also like, her Medicaid was in danger when everything happened. So I had to refer her to another NILAC unit to help her get benefits, but at least now everything looks like it's smooth sailing. To make it official, like I Jane, we had done a three-way conference call with SFA so that I could speak to them, but then she kind of hopped off the phone because she wasn't feeling well. So Jane doesn't know the good news, and I'm waiting. Yeah, but I'm waiting just to get the official notice from Social Security by mail. That way, you know, there's no hidden surprises. But it was really exciting, and it's just like for 3 months, she was running a deficit over a huge deficit in her monthly budget. So it's a huge difference. So very happy. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Alma. We have to do it. So there are about 7 or 8 of us in this room, and we've been trying to be very quiet as other people were talking. But when we put this final presentation together just last week, we didn't know that the overpayment had, the request had been approved. So thank you so much, Alma. How absolutely wonderful. And I can't wait to hear what Jane's going to say when you tell her. So that's fantastic. Thank you. You know, one of the things that I thought was really important that you said was when you submitted everything to Social Security, it was over 50 pages worth of documentation. So that's a lot of time and a lot of effort, but so worth it for the results that you're receiving. So thank you so much for that. And also, I think it's really important for people to know that sometimes the Social Security Administration doesn't let people know that they have an overpayment right away. So you said that it had been 2 years ago, and that can be really confusing for someone to get a letter that says they have an overpayment and they really don't understand, and they really shouldn't have to understand if it was something that happened 2 or more years ago. So that's great that you were able to walk her through that. And then also you mentioned POMS, the Program Operation Manual System. So I just wanted everybody to know what that stands for, and we're actually going to talk about that in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. So thank you very much for that. And with that, we can go on to some action items. Hopefully this webinar has motivated you to enjoy our webinars and to join the Empowered NYC listserv. And then also to register or watch an Empowered NYC webinar. And again, these links are active on our website, and you can get them by going to our website or by opening the PowerPoint that was sent to you earlier today. Remember that this is free and confidential counseling services are available. So to anybody out there to make a referral or to schedule an appointment with a financial counselor, you just need to go to nyc.gov/EmpoweredNYC. And Crystal Rivera is our guru from the Office of Financial Empowerment, and she spoke earlier today on the webinar. So she can help with any appointments, she can help with referrals, she can answer your questions, and you can reach her at crivera@dca.nyc.gov. And with that, we will go on to some resources. So as I mentioned before, SSA Program Operations Manual System, POMS. And what we've included here is a link for SSI POMS and a link for SSDI POMS. If any of you out there are inclined to research the POMS, they can be very complicated, they can be very intense, but as you can see, the counselors are using them to make progress with the individuals that they are assisting. So I just wanted to give you those resources in case you were interested. And of course, as you know, as we go on, we'll give you names and contact information for all of us. So if you have any questions about POMS, you can certainly contact us. Another resource that we have for you is New York ABLE, and ABLE has been coming up a lot lately. So you can contact New York Able's Plan website by going to https://www.mynyable.org, or you could also reach them by phone, 855-5NY-ABLE. And then for those individuals who want to know where their local Social Security office is, or where they may want to go to make an appointment, it may not always be the closest location to the person's home. So we've tried to make that easier for you to pass along to folks, this Social Security office locator. And you can visit that by going to https://secure.ssa.gov/main/JSP. And we'll go on to the next slide, which is all of our contacts. So this is me, Nancy Buteau. If you have any questions or want to follow up after the webinar, Wanda Lopez, who you heard from earlier from OFE, as well as the one and only Crystal Rivera, and Abby Meyerhoff. Abby is with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. So with that, I'm not sure if we have questions, but we're pretty much out of time anyway. So let's just go on to our final slide. Please join us for our next training. That is going to be next month, Tuesday, July 9th, from 1 to 2 p.m. And please remember that when this webinar closes, a survey will pop up. Please fill out the survey. We'd love to get feedback from you. And with that, I just want to thank the team so much for all of the work that they've been doing. It is a pleasure working with all of you, and we'll talk to everyone next month. Thank you.